Hey guys, tonight we're crawling into the sticky, sun-bleached world of 18th century piracy. A world where men slept in swaying hammocks next to barrels of salted fish, where parrots sometimes knew more curse words than their owners, and where a pineapple, yes, a pineapple, could hold more value than a chest of silver. You blink awake to the low creak of timber above you. The lantern sways, casting lazy shadows across the cramped hold of a pirate sloop. The air smells like damp rope, citrus peel, and someone's regrettable choice to bathe last week using only seawater and optimism. You sit up, slowly, careful not to bump your head on the low ceiling, and there, hanging in a net above the food stores, is the most curious prize of the voyage so far. One perfectly ripe pineapple. Its scent cuts through the salty musk like a blade of sweetness. And even though you're on a ship full of men who've literally fought over biscuits, that pineapple might just cause the next mutiny. You probably won't survive this. The heat, the boredom, the occasional cannonball, and yes, the pineapple politics. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, while you're at it, post your location and what time you're listening. I love seeing where my sleepy pirates are tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shift into the rhythm of the sea, lulled by the soft splash of waves against the hull and the distant call of gulls overhead. The crew above is quiet. Most are dozing, sharpening blades, or maybe squinting at the stars, dreaming of land and warm rum. But somewhere in the back of their minds, they're all thinking about it. That pineapple. It's not just a snack, it's status. You wouldn't know it now, strolling past them in supermarket aisles stacked 12 high. But in the 18th century, pineapples were luxury incarnate. Exotic, expensive, and famously temperamental, they didn't travel well. They bruised easily, rotted fast, and demanded a climate far warmer and wetter than anywhere sensible folk might choose to live. But here, in the Caribbean, pineapples were at home. Native to South America, they'd been cultivated long before European ships darkened the horizon. The Spanish were among the first to taste their syrupy flesh, describing them as the most delicious fruit on earth. By the time pirates showed up, pineapples had already become something of a craze back in Europe. Kings grew them in hothouses. Wealthy hosts rented them, yes, rented, for display at parties. Some were so coveted they were paraded down banquet tables like edible trophies, only to be taken away untouched, lest someone actually eat the thing. So imagine being a half-sunburnt pirate, surrounded by rot and hardship, and finding yourself face to fruit with something that might make a duchess weep. It wasn't just food, it was a symbol, a story, a prize. And let's be honest, pirates loved prizes. Now, historians still argue whether the average pirate actually understood the full cultural cachet of the pineapple. Some claim it was just tasty and rare, end of story. Others point to surviving journals, sketchy though they are, describing arguments over who got the first slice or who had to carry it ashore to impress the local governor. One particularly salty logbook from a captain known only as Red Jack details a 3-day standoff between crew members who couldn't agree if the fruit should be eaten or preserved in rum for future admiration. Quirky stuff, sure, but pineapple fever wasn't confined to pirates. It infected the whole empire. In England, pineapples adorned gateposts, napkin rings, and even the heads of well-heeled canes. Pineapple motifs were architectural shorthand for, I have traveled or know someone who has. To be seen with one was to announce wealth, worldliness, and tropical conquest, all rolled into one spiky package. So naturally, pirates, those salty disruptors of colonial order, wanted in. You lean back in your hammock, the wood creaking gently, and picture it. A crew of sunburned rogues pulling into port, proudly displaying not a flag or a prisoner, but a pineapple. A literal fruit as a flex. It's the kind of historical absurdity that's almost too good to be true, and yet, here we are. The ship rocks, a rat skitters past your boots. Someone coughs above, maybe dreaming of citrus. You close your eyes and drift, letting the gentle thrum of the sea lull you towards sleep. There will be battles and barter, naval gossip and fruit feasts ahead. But for now, it's just you, the night, and that strange golden symbol swinging gently in its hammock net like the crown jewel of the Caribbean. You're still swaying in your hammock when the ship creaks into the next morning. It's hot already, the kind of humid heat that clings to your skin and soaks your linen shirt before you've even reached for the bucket of seawater meant to pass as a morning wash. The crew grumbles as boots hit the deck. One man curses the sun, another curses his boots. But somewhere amid the slow crawl of waking, there's one thing keeping spirits marginally above mutiny, that ridiculous pineapple. Now, to understand why this fruit held such power over hardened criminals of the sea, you've got to go back to the courts and gardens of Europe where pineapple madness began. In the 1600s, a pineapple wasn't just rare, it was mythical. Imagine encountering a fruit so strange, so fragrant, so gold and symmetrical that you didn't eat it. You painted it, or commissioned a carving of it for your mansion gate, or preserved it in brandy just so you could sniff it when guests came over. And if you were truly daring, you built it a greenhouse. Yes, entire buildings were dedicated to coaxing pineapples to fruit in climates that had no business growing them. By the 18th century, the pineapple had become a spiky symbol of everything colonialism aspired to be. Exotic, extravagant, and just a little bit ridiculous. The thing is, pineapples weren't just rare because they grew in faraway places. They were finicky. They hated travel. They bruised at the drop of a hat and rotted faster than you could say, tropical import tariff. So if you managed to get one onto a ship in the Caribbean and deliver it to, say, a drawing room in London without it turning into fermented mulch, you were a logistical genius and a minor miracle worker. Naturally, pirates weren't interested in making polite deliveries. They were more about immediate gratification. You see something rare and golden in a plantation storehouse, you take it. You want to show off to another ship's crew or charm your way into the governor's good graces? Flash the pineapple. No cannonballs required. Back in the Caribbean, local farmers knew all about the pineapple's potential. Indigenous peoples like the Tupi had cultivated the fruit for generations. It wasn't a novelty to them. It was food, useful, portable, tasty. And when the colonizers arrived with their wide-eyed wonder and endless pockets, pineapples quickly became one of the most valuable fruits in the region. Historians still debate whether pirates ever truly engaged in what we'd now call pineapple diplomacy. That is, using the fruit to negotiate access to ports, favors, or even bribes. Some argue that the symbolism was too subtle for the average rogue sailor. Others believe that pirates, ever the opportunists, quickly learned to weaponize luxury. Take, for example, the curious tale of Captain Larkspur, a privateer turned pirate who reportedly entered Havana under false pretenses, bearing not weapons or treasure, but a single pineapple on a silver platter. The guards, according to one grainy memoir, were so enchanted by the offering they allowed him through without inspection. Later accounts suggest he spent 3 days docked and well fed, all thanks to the fruit. Whether this is true or just salty legend, the story stuck. Of course, not everyone aboard ship was thrilled about the attention a pineapple could bring. Some crewmen believed pineapples were bad luck, too bright, too fragrant, too closely associated with nobility. One account even mentions a superstition that if the captain sliced the pineapple himself, the voyage would end in disaster. This may or may not have been invented by the ship's cook, who very much wanted first bite. You step carefully along the deck, the planks warm beneath your bare feet. The fruit is still there, proudly displayed in its net, drawing side eyes and occasional groans from men who think it should have been eaten yesterday. But no one's quite brave enough to touch it. Not yet. It's a standoff of absurd proportions. Men who face down storms and sword fights now paralyzed by the etiquette of fruit consumption. And here's the kicker. In a world full of cheap sugar, pineapples still held their own. Cane was abundant and turned into rum or traded in bulk. But pineapple was personal, intimate. You didn't divvy it up by the pound. You sliced it in rings, passed it in sticky fingers, savored it. It didn't just make you feel rich, it made you feel civilized, even if your last bath was 2 months ago and your socks had long since become toeless regrets. One French botanist who briefly sailed with a corsair crew recorded a heated debate over whether pineapples should be eaten raw, pickled, or blended with rum and gunpowder to create some sort of experimental elixir. Spoiler alert, the gunpowder didn't improve the flavor. And speaking of flavor, The 18th century pineapple was a different beast than the ones you get today. Smaller, often more sour, and highly unpredictable. Biting into one was a gamble, sometimes sugary perfection, other times acidic disappointment. That uncertainty added to the thrill. You lean over the railing, letting the wind cool your face. Below, the sea sparkles, endless and indifferent. The crew is beginning to stir with purpose now. Ropes being tightened, sails checked, someone mumbling about needing more salted cod. But still, the pineapple looms, an object of envy, of hope, of status, not quite a treasure, not quite ration. It's hard not to chuckle. In a world where most pirates fought over barrels and booty, here was a crew quietly unraveling over a fruit. And yet, somehow it makes sense. When everything is hard, hot, and half-rotten, even a glimmer of sweetness, a juicy, golden, fragrant promise, can feel like magic. The ship lurches gently as the breeze fills the sails, and you find yourself watching the horizon where a smudge of green promises land, or at least a brief respite from the endless, shimmering blue. You can almost smell it already. Damp earth, crushed leaves, and somewhere, the sweet tang of ripening pineapples baking under the sun. Pirates didn't set out seeking pineapples. Not at first. They came for gold, silver, sweetness, things that jingled in a purse or bought favor in a port tavern. But as more and more ships trawled the waters of the Caribbean and beyond, pirates began to stumble across a prize they hadn't expected, the native fruits of these steamy, fertile islands, and none so eye-catching as the pineapple. The Caribbean climate was perfect for these prickly delights. Rich volcanic soils, heavy rains, and the kind of heat that makes your shirt stick to your back before you've tied your boots. All of it conspired to produce pineapples of breathtaking flavor. Sweeter, juicier, and more fragrant than anything Europe could dream of growing. In its sad little glass houses, these fruits were almost obnoxiously good. And so it was that many a pirate ship, limping into a hidden cove to patch sails or refill water casks, found its crew wandering inland, blades drawn, not for battle, but for harvesting. The fruit grew wild along the edges of plantations and jungle paths. A small grove of pineapples could mean a feast, or at least a brief break from the monotony of salt pork and ship's biscuit. Some pirates even wrote of the pleasure of eating them fresh, skin hacked off with a dagger, juice running down sunburned chins, seeds spat into the sand. Historians still argue whether pineapples were truly a staple of pirate diets or more of an opportunistic treat. Some say the fruit was too fragile and perishable to be carried far. Others point out that pirates rarely planned for the long haul. What mattered was immediate satisfaction. The pineapple was perfect for that. A quick bite of sweetness before the next storm or skirmish. You pick your way across the deck, careful to avoid a coil of rope that seems determined to trip you. Overhead, a gull circles, eyeing the ship's scraps, while the crew busies themselves with the mundane chores of life at sea, patching sails, greasing pulleys, muttering about the captain's obsession with fancy fruit. And yet, it wasn't just about taste. There was a certain thrill in claiming something that symbolized the wealth and power of the colonial elite. Plantation owners flaunted pineapples on their tables, in their gardens, even carved into their furniture. For a pirate, snatching one up was like flipping the bird to the entire imperial order. A sweet, juicy rebellion, if you will. Of course, not every pirate was so poetic about it. One logbook recounts a crew that came across a pineapple grove, stripped it bare, and promptly fell ill from gorging on too much fresh fruit after weeks of nothing but hardtack. The entry ends with a note that they recovered quickly, thanks to copious amounts of rum and the questionable medical advice of the ship's cook, who insisted that pineapple juice made an excellent wound wash. Whether this worked is, shall we say, debatable. You lean against the mast, feeling the hum of the ship beneath you, the gentle sway that never quite leaves your bones once you've been at sea long enough. The pineapple in its net seems to glow in the afternoon sun, its spiky crown casting strange shadows across the deck. Somewhere below, in the galley, a cook is surely scheming, imagining a stew sweetened with pineapple flesh or a tart to impress the captain. But there's a tension in the air. No one wants to be the first to cut into it. To do so would be to claim it, and with that claim would come all the politics of pirate life. Who gets the first bite? the biggest slice, the last sticky piece clinging to the core. And let's not forget the superstition. Sailors are a suspicious lot, and pirates doubly so. Some said that pineapples on board could ward off bad luck, provided they were treated with respect. Others whispered that the fruit tempted fate, that it was too bright, too showy, too tied to the powerful men and women pirates sought to escape. The truth? Probably somewhere in between. But it's easy to see how a spiky fruit, with its golden promise of sweetness, could come to symbolize so much on these long, lonely voyages. The land draws nearer now, the smudge of green resolving into palms and sandy beaches. The crew stirs, anticipation crackling in the air. Will they find more pineapples waiting ashore? Or will this single specimen remain the ship's most prized possession for another day? You close your eyes, letting the breeze wash over you, heavy with the scent of salt and sun. The ship groans, the sea whispers, and somewhere below, a rat pauses to sniff the air, perhaps hoping for a taste of that mysterious coveted fruit. The ship slides towards shore like a beast too tired to growl. The sails slacken, then catch again, the anchor dropped with a rusty sigh. You watch as crew members leap into action, or what passes for action after a week at sea and one too many disagreements over someone's snoring like a cannonball. They're eager, not because they've missed land so much, but because they've missed fresh things, fruit, shade, soil that doesn't pitch beneath their feet, and maybe, just maybe, more pineapples. You join the landing party, boots crunching onto warm sand, the sun high and unbothered by your salt-stained shirt. The island is humid, green, and humming with life. Parrots scream like children, mosquitoes immediately declare war on your neck. But somewhere in that tangle of palms and vines, there are pineapples waiting, and you're not alone in hunting them. Now, let's talk about the real reason pirates started to care about tropical fruits, especially juicy ones like pineapples: scurvy. Ah, scurvy, the silent saboteur of long voyages. Caused by a lack of vitamin C, this delightful little affliction could rot your gums, loosen your teeth, bloat your legs, and make your skin turn a shade of regret. More than one voyage was ended, not by storms or battles, but by bodies too sick to raise a sail. Citrus fruits were, of course, the go-to cure. Limes, lemons, oranges, anything that could stop your body from slowly falling apart. British naval ships even earned the nickname limeys because of this practice. But here's the kicker. Pineapples, while containing some vitamin C, were never quite the anti-scurvy superstars that lemons were. They were more like the stylish cousin who shows up to the medical emergency wearing silk shoes. Lovely to look at, not particularly helpful in a crisis. Still, that didn't stop pirates from trying. Historians still argue whether pirates actively believed pineapples could prevent scurvy, or if they just assumed that tasty and fruity equaled probably healthy. There are ship records that mention pineapple juice being squeezed into water barrels to refresh the crew. One French surgeon traveling aboard a privateer noted that the juice was also applied to small cuts, allegedly to keep them from turning foul, though modern doctors would likely recommend literally anything else. You hack through underbrush with a dull cutlass, and there they are, pineapples, half hidden in the shade, spiky crowns catching the light. They're smaller than you remember, earthy. Some are just ripening, others overripe and already swarmed by ants. One crew member lets out a triumphant whoop and lifts a perfect specimen above his head like he's found Atlantis. Back on the beach, they're washed in seawater, possibly the worst choice for cleaning food, but hygiene standards aren't exactly sparkling at the moment, and then distributed. Not fairly. Never fairly. One for the captain, of course, a few slices for the men who rowed hardest, the rest negotiated in murmurs, gestures, and the unspoken threat of sharp objects. It's a quiet feast. There's something about biting into cool fruit on a hot day that shuts everyone up. You chew slowly. It's not just sweet, it's complex, tangy, a little musky, with just enough acid to wake up your taste buds from their long nap under salted meat and stale bread. It runs down your chin and you don't care. No one does. Even the parrots pause. One pirate stares at his slice like it holds the secrets of the universe. Another, less romantic, starts muttering about fermenting the leftovers for science. Someone else is already planting the top of the pineapple in the sand, convinced it'll grow before the next full moon. That's Not how pineapples work, but points for enthusiasm. And just like that, the moment passes. The beach is littered with rinds and footprints, the fruit gone too fast. But spirits are high. For a few hours, the crew feels less like outlaws and more like victorious explorers. You'd be surprised how much morale can rest on 5 pounds of sugar-packed fruit. Later, as the sun begins to set and the sky shifts from blue to bruised lavender, you spot the captain sitting quietly with what's left of the ship's original pineapple, the one from the net. He hasn't touched it yet, just watching it, maybe thinking, or maybe waiting for the right occasion. Because a pineapple like that isn't just food, it's an event. There's an unspoken rule on ships. You don't waste rare things. You hoard them, admire them, tell stories about them. And when you finally do use them, it should be memorable. You stretch out on the sand, full and a little sun-drunk, the tang of pineapple still lingering on your tongue. The stars begin to wink on above you, one by one. Somewhere in the jungle, something hoots. And you wonder, not for the first time, how the world ever decided a fruit could become a symbol of status, survival, and the occasional sticky bribe. But maybe that's the pirate way. Take what's rare, what's beautiful, what doesn't belong to you, and make it yours. The morning after a pineapple feast is never quite as glamorous as the feast itself. You wake up with sand in your ears, a mild case of sunburn on one shin, and the vague memory of someone trying to sing sea shanties with a chunk of pineapple rind stuck in their hat like a feather. The crew is groggy but cheerful. Even the captain seems almost benevolent. He still hasn't eaten that one prized pineapple, mind you. It sits beside him like a golden pet. But he's been stroking it occasionally, as if considering whether to slice it or write poetry about it. Back on board, you haul anchor with the others and sail on, the wind stiff with the smell of seaweed and sun-warmed wood. The pineapple patch is behind you now, but the fruit lingers in everyone's memory, and, in at least one case, someone's pocket. The cook claims to be drying a slice under his pillow for safekeeping. There are no rules anymore. But here's the twist in the tale. While pineapples weren't especially helpful for scurvy, they were incredibly valuable for a different reason: the black market. Pineapples, like many tropical goods, were at the heart of a shadowy, fragrant economy. Smugglers, pirates, and opportunistic merchants knew that while a sack of salt cod might feed your crew, a single pineapple could buy you a night's shelter, a warm bath, or even discreet silence from someone who knew too much. Exotic fruits were luxury trade items, even half-rotten ones. Historians still debate just how organized the pineapple smuggling trade was. Some argue that entire shipments were intercepted, rerouted, and sold on the sly to wealthy plantation owners or ambitious colonial administrators. Others believe that it was mostly small-scale theft, pirates plucking the best fruits during raids and trading them informally in coastal towns. One account from a Dutch settlement in the early 1700s describes a gentleman of poor complexion who offered 2 pineapples in exchange for a gold ring and a night with a feather bed. No names were recorded, of course, but the implication was clear. This fruit could open doors, literal ones, with hinges. And it wasn't just the Caribbean. Word spread. European elites, especially in England and France, became obsessed with the pineapple's shape, scent, and near mystical rarity. Pineapples were used in portraits, weddings, even funerals. There were rumors, unconfirmed but delicious, that one French noblewoman refused to marry a suitor because he didn't bring a pineapple to their third meeting. A different kind of dowry, you might say. On the pirate side of things, word of this obsession filtered back to sea captains and quartermasters. They began to realize that a pineapple, properly handled, could be more useful than silver. One bribe here, one distraction there, one small crate quietly exchanged in a coastal alley, and suddenly your ship isn't being searched for stolen powder. And the best part? You didn't even need a whole crate. Sometimes all it took was one golden, spiky, syrup-scented bribe. There's a curious report from the port of Portobello in 1721. A Spanish colonial officer noted the arrival of a suspicious ship that claimed to be carrying spices and religious items. It was, in fact, loaded with rum, dried mangoes, and several crates of pineapples hidden under a false floor. Rather than report the incident, the officer allegedly helped himself to 3 of the fruits and waved the ship onward. His official note: No irregularities found, but cargo did smell pleasant. You can't help but laugh as you imagine the scene. Pirates playing it cool while their most dangerous contraband is slowly ripening under the deck. And let's not forget how pineapples traveled, or rather, didn't. They bruised easily, rotted quickly, and hated being jostled, which, unfortunately, describes most pirate voyages. Some clever captains tried to cushion their pineapples in hay or wrap them in oil-soaked cloth. Others just ate them immediately and spun a tale about what could have been delivered, if not for that suspicious accidental cannonball incident. But pineapples weren't only smuggled to Europe. They were also exchanged between ships, sold at island markets, and occasionally gifted in gestures of strange diplomacy. There are letters describing pirate crews approaching isolated outposts and presenting pineapples as signs of goodwill. We come not to raid, but to barter. Behold, fruit. Honestly, it's hard to argue with that. One island priest even wrote that pirates offered him the most fragrant pineapple I have ever tasted, along with a bottle of rum and a strong suggestion that he forget he ever saw them. He did. The pineapple, he said, was divinely ripe. The fruit, it turns out, could be a peace offering, a payment, or a performance. It was a shapeshifter in the pirate world, sweet, symbolic, and slippery with potential. As you sit near the bow, the sea darkening with the arrival of evening, you hear laughter below deck. Someone's drawn a little crown on a pineapple rind and is pretending to knight the cat. Another is chewing a fibrous chunk of core and claiming he can see the future. You smile. Absurdity is normal here. Sanity is optional. And above it all, the captain's pineapple, still untouched, rests in its net, regal and unbothered. You wonder if he'll ever eat it, or if it will simply follow him from port to port, a sweet little symbol of power. You're jolted awake in the middle of the night, not by gunfire, not by the scream of sails tearing in a storm, but by the unmistakable sound of someone tripping over a bucket and whisper yelling about pineapples. The deck groans beneath sleepy feet. You crack one eye open. Moonlight spills through the hatch above, silvering everything, including the slightly guilty face of the ship's cook, who is very clearly trying to sneak the captain's prized pineapple into a canvas sack. A tense standoff follows. The captain doesn't say a word. He just appears behind the cook like a disappointed parent. One eyebrow raised, one hand on his cutlass. The cook freezes, pineapple in hand, like a toddler caught mid-cookie theft. Silence. Then a grunt. The pineapple is placed back in its net. The moment passes. Welcome to pirate life, where even fruit theft is a cause for dramatic tension. But here's the thing. This wasn't just about hunger. By the early 18th century, pineapples had become symbols of wealth, excess, and yes, prestige. Especially on a pirate ship, where almost everything else was either rusting, leaking, or trying to bite you, a ripe pineapple could feel like treasure. And not just because it tasted good, because it meant you'd won something. Let's sail now to one of the lesser discussed elements of piracy, raiding for food. You might imagine pirates only after gold, jewels, and maybe the occasional cask of rum. And you'd be partly right. But pirates, especially those operating around the Caribbean and West African coasts, often targeted supply ships and plantation storehouses, not for coin, but for crops. Pineapples weren't planted in massive quantities like sugarcane, but they were grown in tidy garden rows on many estates, especially those trying to impress visiting colonial officials. These pineapples were prized not just by their owners, but by anyone desperate for fresh food. Salted meat could only carry you so far before your gums rebelled. Historians still debate whether there were truly organized fruit raids by pirate crews, expeditions with the express purpose of nabbing rare produce, or whether pineapples were simply pleasant bonuses during broader assaults. But several plantation journals do make cryptic references to the fruiting beds being trampled by bandits, or thieves having the gall to leave only the rinds. One Jamaican farmer wrote angrily about his best pineapple plot being plundered, and not even the mangoes disturbed, which, frankly, shows priorities. On one rare occasion in 1718, a coastal village in Martinique reportedly defended its pineapple groves with muskets and dogs, though whether the attackers were pirates, runaway sailors, or simply very determined snackers remains unclear. And speaking of defense, some plantations began fencing off their fruit gardens, or growing pineapples in enclosed courtyards where they could be guarded more easily. Unlike sugarcane or bananas, pineapples were often grown as ornamental displays. They looked good, they were sculptural, fancy, like the kind of fruit you'd expect to see perched on a duchess's hat if fashion took a wrong turn. Which brings us back to the pirates. For men who spent most of their time drenched in sweat, grease, and the occasional splinter, a pineapple was a luxury object. To possess one, even briefly, was to feel like royalty, or at least like someone who might not die of mold exposure in the next 3 days. Some captains even included pineapples in their spoils lists, right alongside powder, pistols, and pigs. One ledger recovered from a wreck off the coast of Hispaniola lists 4 crates of molasses, 2 barrels of pork, and 1 worth fine pineapple, taken from governor's courtyard. That last part is underlined, twice. There's something poetic in that, isn't there? Even the shipboard rituals around pineapples had a strange, reverent air. Crews would gather to divide up slices or to toast a rare delivery with a mug of rum cut with juice. Pineapple wine, fermented from the flesh and peels, was sometimes made in barrels on deck, although most reports suggest it tasted like vinegar and regret. Yet despite the occasional culinary failure, the obsession persisted. One particularly colorful captain, known only as Tobacco Will, was said to have worn a carved wooden pineapple atop his tricorn hat. When asked why, he reportedly answered, "Because I'm sweeter than your average scoundrel." His crew painted pineapples on their sails, poorly, and were, according to rumor, the most well-fed pirates in their quadrant. Of course, that didn't stop rival crews from mocking them mercilessly. Pirate rivalries weren't just about turf or loot, they were about branding. And the pineapple pirates became shorthand for those weirdos who raid gardens and smell like fruit salad. But mockery aside, the raids continued. They were fast, quiet, and surprisingly effective. A few men on shore, a quick rush through the bushes, and, if you were lucky, a sack full of gold-skinned treasure to lift morale on the return journey. You lie back on the deck now, the stars scattered above like glittering grains of salt. Someone nearby hums a tune, something low and slow with lyrics about pineapples and freedom. A joke? Maybe. Or maybe it's a kind of lullaby. Because in the hard, hungry world of piracy, anything sweet was a kind of salvation. Even a fruit that fought back with spikes. You wake to the smell of something burning. Not the alarming kind. No sails on fire, no cannon explosions, just the familiar scent of someone overdoing it with the rum flambé. Breakfast, if you can call it that, consists of fish, hard bread, and the charred remains of what was definitely once pineapple. The cook insists it was intentional. Caramelized, he says with suspicious pride, waving a blackened fork. No one believes him. Still, there's something festive in the air. Spirits are high. The captain has announced a celebration, which, on a pirate ship, can mean anything from burying treasure to performing a dramatic reading of the latest wanted posters. But this time, it's simpler. The prize pineapple is finally going to be eaten. It's a big deal. The fruit is carried up from the hold with great ceremony, nestled in a battered linen napkin that may or may not have been last week's bandage. The crew gathers, eyes bright, some still dabbing off sleep or salt spray. Even the cat makes an appearance, though it's unclear if it's here for the fruit or the potential scraps. Now, pineapples were rare, yes, but in pirate hands they also became the centerpiece of something you might call a floating feast. Think of it as dinner theater meets survival. A crew that had been gnawing on ship's biscuit and dried beans for a week could suddenly dine on roasted fish, fresh fruit, and, if they were lucky, a vegetable or two scrounged from shore. Historians still argue over how common these pineapple parties were. Some claim they were once a voyage affairs, only held when a large enough stash was secured. Others suggest they were impromptu, sparked by good weather, good plunder, or the simple fact that the fruit wouldn't last much longer without growing mold. But accounts do exist. Logs mention banquets of coconut stew, grilled pork, and sliced pineapple served in hollowed-out shells. One record describes pirates drinking rum from pineapple halves like goblets, a practice both delightful and sticky. Another story, likely apocryphal, involves a toast to Neptune with a pineapple held aloft like a holy relic, followed by a dance-off that ended with 2 men wrestling in fruit juice. Quirky details aside, What matters is this: these meals meant something. For men constantly bracing against danger, a shared moment of pleasure, a sweet bite of golden flesh, was more than indulgence. It was unity. You sit cross-legged on the deck as the captain slices into the pineapple. The crew leans in, the smell immediate, sharp, sugary, and almost floral. It cuts through the brine and sweat like a song. One piece for the captain, of course, one for the first mate. Then it's passed around, slice by slice, mouthful by mouthful. No one speaks while eating. It's an unspoken rule. For once, the only sounds are the slap of the waves and the gentle crunch of teeth through ripe flesh. And then someone starts humming. It's a tune you don't quite recognize, something low and swaying, like the roll of the ship. Others join in. A tin whistle appears from a pocket. A drum beat starts, on a barrel lid, with the cook's wooden spoon. Before you know it, the pineapple party becomes a true pirate jamboree. Off-key singing, a limping sort of dance, a toast shouted so loudly it scares off a gull. There's laughter, clapping, and at least one dramatic monologue delivered by a man holding 2 pineapple tops as if they were puppets. "Look at me. I'm the fruit of kings," he declares, wobbling. No one corrects him. Someone tosses him a crust of bread like an encore bouquet. And in that moment, under the bruised sky of evening and the last rays of sun slicing through the rigging, the ship doesn't feel like a den of criminals. It feels like a floating village, a makeshift family, held together not by law or order, but by the ridiculous joy of a shared treat. Of course, not every pirate party ended so peacefully. There are tales of rival ships firing warning shots over particularly decadent pineapple displays. One duel reportedly began over who had the ripest slice. The loser had to eat the rind. Dignity was not his strong suit. Some captains even used pineapple parties as morale boosters or loyalty tests. Fight hard, lads, and the fruit will be sweet. Simple, effective bribery, but edible. A few crews developed their own strange traditions, carving faces into the fruit, tying scraps of ribbon around the crown, or burying the core on shore for luck. One crew, according to a Portuguese missionary's journal, believed pineapple juice could ward off sea curses, though he noted that this belief coincided suspiciously with the ship's discovery of very strong rum. You lean back, full and a little tipsy, watching the moon rise. The rind scraps are piled in a wooden bowl, the juice drying sticky on your fingers. The music fades. The cat has claimed the empty pineapple napkin as a blanket. And just like that, the party's over. But something lingers, not just the sweetness on your tongue, or the pleasant buzz in your head, but the rare sense that, for once, the sea has given instead of taken, that in a life of drift and danger, there are still small, golden miracles to be savored slowly, together. By morning, the sticky remains of last night's celebration are mostly gone, washed away by a particularly enthusiastic deck scrubber and one too many buckets of seawater. The pineapple rind is missing. The cat is smug. No one's admitting to anything. You stretch your limbs and look around. The ship is already underway again, the sails full, the breeze sharp with the smell of salt and someone frying something questionable below deck. Life returns to normal, or at least pirate normal, which is to say, a little chaotic, a little sunburned, and always one bad decision away from drama. But something's shifted. It's subtle, like the way a ship slowly veers off course when no one's holding the wheel. The mood is lighter. Even the grumpiest crew member, known primarily for cursing at clouds, is humming quietly as he coils rope. Maybe it's the afterglow of sugar and rum, or maybe it's the lingering status high that only a proper pineapple can deliver. Let's talk about that, status. Because for all the ways pirates were rebels, outlaws, and general breakers of the colonial mold, they were still deeply human. And humans, as we know, love symbols, especially symbols you can eat. In the 18th century, the pineapple was the symbol. Forget crowns, jewels, or powdered wigs. If you walked into a party holding a pineapple, you didn't need to say anything. You'd arrived. You'd either been somewhere exotic or knew someone who had. You had money, influence, maybe even a greenhouse with a little fireplace to keep your fruit warm in the English winter. And pirates? Pirates wanted that same reaction, but louder. Historians still argue whether pirates actually used pineapples to boost their reputations, or if they simply flaunted them like trophies. Some logs describe captains presenting pineapples during negotiations, or arriving in port with one held high like a banner. One governor in the Leeward Islands wrote that a ragged ship of suspicious character docked peacefully and delivered a single very fine fruit along with no paperwork whatsoever. It was accepted without question. The captain was invited to dinner. What did that pineapple mean? A peace offering? A distraction? Or simply a loud, sweet declaration of presence? The answer may lie in the very nature of pirate society. Unlike the rigid hierarchies of navies or merchant fleets, pirate crews often operated with more flexibility, elections, shared plunder, even compensation for injury. But prestige still mattered. A captain had to command loyalty, and nothing said, "I'm doing well," quite like a fruit so rare it had its own bodyguard in European households. Some pirates took it further. Rumors swirled of pineapple-themed tattoos, though evidence is limited and mostly comes from sailors whose memory was clouded by medicinal rum. Others carved pineapple patterns into the wood of their quarters or etched them into tin cups. One particularly flamboyant crew allegedly carved a pineapple figurehead for their sloop, though accounts suggest it lasted roughly 4 hours before being chewed to bits by seagulls. And of course, there were the flirtations. In several coastal towns, especially in the Spanish Main and parts of Saint-Domingue, there are letters and diaries that suggest pineapples were used as romantic gestures by sailors looking to charm the locals. One rather poetic note from a French Creole woman thanks a mariner with sand-colored hair for the golden gift, more fragrant than perfume, more sincere than any letter. The mariner, presumably, had handed over a pineapple instead of love poetry. Bold move, possibly sticky. In taverns and markets, too, the fruit held power. Need the innkeeper to give you a room without asking for coin? Flash a pineapple. Want to skip the line at the bathhouse? Offer a slice, trying to convince a skeptical merchant you're more than a vagrant with a boat? Place a pineapple on the counter and watch their posture change. One Caribbean barkeep reportedly kept a pineapple on his shelf, not for eating, but as a prop. He claimed it made his rum seem more expensive. Where there's fruit, he said, there's fortune. But this social currency wasn't without risks. There are stories, half legend, half gossip, of pirates being robbed, not for gold, but for pineapples. One particularly unfortunate man in Barbados allegedly had his entire basket of fruit stolen by a rival crew while bathing. When asked what was taken, he replied mournfully, "Just the pineapples, they left the money." You peer over the railing, the wind tugging at your hair. In the distance, another ship sails past, its flag nondescript, its hull weathered. A crewman beside you squints, then mutters, "Show-offs." You look again. On the upper deck, a single pineapple is mounted on a pole, catching the sun like a golden flame. A message, a challenge, maybe both. That's the thing about pirate pride. It wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was just juicy. You chuckle quietly as the ship rolls forward. The sea stretches on, full of wind and stories. And somewhere out there, another crew is slicing into fruit, sharing jokes, and hoping no one drops the last piece overboard. Because on these waters, a pineapple isn't just a fruit. It's flair, it's confidence. It's a small, ridiculous crown that says, "We may be thieves, but we've got taste." What afternoon sun beats down on the deck like a giant, angry frying pan. The crew has gone quiet, not out of fear or fatigue, but because it's just too hot to argue. Even the parrot is silent, wings drooped, glaring at the horizon like it owes him money. You fan yourself with a scrap of old sailcloth, squinting toward a little dot on the waves. Another ship. And what's that tied to its rigging? A pineapple. Because of course it is. By now you've seen firsthand how this fruit functions, not just as food or status, but as a message. In pirate culture, the pineapple had many meanings. One slice could say, "We come in peace." A whole fruit placed on a dock post might mean, "We want to trade, not raid." It was like a fruity semaphore, if semaphore had a strong scent and occasionally rolled off the railing into the sea. You'd think pirates, with all their flair for dramatic flags and skull motifs, would be above such wholesome symbols. But in truth, they were masters of subtlety when it suited them. And a pineapple, well, it was just ambiguous enough to be interesting. Historians still argue whether pineapples were ever officially used as communication tools between ships. Most of the stories we have are from logs and journals, often written by sailors or merchants puzzled by the fruit signals of the pirate crews. One Dutch trader wrote that when approached by what he feared was a raiding vessel, the pirates simply raised a pineapple tied to a pole. No shots fired, just a long, silent exchange of sticky symbolism. They ended up trading dried fish for gunpowder. Everyone left happy and slightly confused. But pineapples weren't just used for diplomacy at sea. On land, they had their own language. In some Caribbean ports, placing a pineapple on your table while docked could signal that your ship was friendly and had fresh fruit or goods to barter. It was also used by innkeepers in taverns who wanted to attract pirate coin without advertising too loudly. A small pineapple carving above the door, open to seafarers, no questions asked, possibly no change returned either. One tavern in Tortuga became famous for its pineapple hour, a mysterious window between sunset and full dark when pirates could enter and trade goods, usually fruit, rum, or suspiciously nice boots, without legal scrutiny. Locals called it fruit o'clock. It didn't last long, mostly because it descended into chaos when someone brought bananas and started a brawl. Still, the pineapple's reputation endured. It was flirtatious, strategic, occasionally theatrical. One anecdote, probably more tall tale than truth, tells of a pirate named Rosie Goldtooth Malone, who used pineapples to court a Spanish admiral's daughter. He'd leave them on her windowsill while anchored offshore, each carved with a different message. Supposedly, one had a tiny heart etched into the rind. Another, a very poor attempt at poetry. They were discovered eventually. Rosie had to sail off in a hurry, but the girl kept the fruit. Years later, she named her parrot Pina. Coincidence? Probably not. Even ordinary islanders got swept up in the symbolism. Some coastal farmers left pineapples on their fences to signal friendship, or, in some cases, to suggest they were open to negotiation with whoever happened to be sailing past. Pirates took note. These weren't raids, these were exchanges, quiet, delicate ones, occasionally with awkward small talk. There's even evidence that pineapples were used in pirate funerals, not as a central ritual, nothing quite so dramatic, but sometimes placed near the grave or tossed overboard as a parting gesture. One English logbook from 1732 notes the burial at sea of a sailor named Tom Witt, with all the fruit remaining aboard, as was his wish. 3 pineapples, reportedly, probably overripe, possibly fermented, very sentimental. You lean against the railing, sea spray dusting your face. The other ship passes without incident, its crew waving lazily. One of them points to the pineapple tied to their rigging. You raise a hand in reply. No cannons, no shouting, just mutual understanding. 2 crews with a shared respect for the language of fruit. Behind you, someone's whittling a tiny pineapple into the mast. Another pirate is balancing a pineapple crown on the ship's compass, declaring it the New North. The cat, ever the opportunist, has claimed the pineapple crate as a bed. No one moves her. And you're just beginning to realize how deep this goes, that what started as a strange fascination has evolved into something richer, almost mythic, because the pineapple wasn't just sweet and spiky, it was fluid. A bribe, a banner, a bargaining chip, a calling card. Sometimes it meant, we come in peace, other times, we're watching you. And occasionally, this fruit is about to be fermented into something very questionable. Proceed with caution, but always, it meant presence. That someone had taken the time to find, claim, and display it. That they'd fought off rot and seagulls to keep it intact. That they wanted to be noticed, not with violence, but with something golden, absurd, and impossible to ignore. The wind has picked up now, snapping the sails like laundry on a tantrum. You clutch the railing as the ship leans into a steady tack, cutting across the blue like it's got somewhere very specific to be, even if the crew doesn't. The pineapple crate slides an inch. The cat opens one eye and adjusts her nap accordingly. She's used to the chaos. As you duck below deck to avoid the sun's wrath, you pass by something curious. A wooden box, smaller than a crate, bigger than a chest, with slits cut into the sides and a lid that smells faintly of soil. You lift it. Inside, pineapple tops, green and spiky, some just beginning to root, others already suspiciously wilted. There's a name scrawled on the side in charcoal, The Orchard. Yes, that's right. Someone on board is trying to grow pineapples on a pirate ship. Now let's be clear, this is not a good idea. Pineapples are patient plants. They can take up to 2 years to fruit. They don't like movement, brine, or the general temperament of sea life. They need sun, stable soil, and water that isn't being thrown at them by an angry ocean every few minutes. But still, pirates tried. Historians still argue whether these shipboard gardens were a real horticultural effort or just a running joke. Some say they were symbolic, an attempt to bring a piece of land life to sea. Others believe certain captains were genuinely obsessed with cultivating floating orchards. There's even one account, though possibly embellished, of a galleon retrofitted with a greenhouse on its upper deck. It was reportedly sunk by a squall before the first fruit appeared. More commonly, though, pirates kept the tops, cut from consumed pineapples, and attempted to sprout them, sometimes in soil pots, sometimes just stuffed in sacks of damp sand, sometimes in jars of seawater that very quickly turned foul. Why? Because growing your own pineapple wasn't just thrifty, it was aspirational. To take this exotic, valuable fruit and make it yours, not just to eat but to replicate, was an act of defiance. Against the colonies, against the trading monopolies, against time itself. You weren't just stealing fruit, you were trying to become the supplier. And besides, if it ever worked, you'd have the rarest pirate prize imaginable, a homegrown pineapple raised entirely at sea. Talk about bragging rights. One captain, nicknamed Limping Lucius, supposedly held a naming ceremony for his potted pineapple plant. Lady Thistle, she was called, and her leaf growth was charted weekly in the ship's log. She was reportedly lost overboard during a cannon misfire and mourned with a full bottle of rum. Another, known simply as Smudge, swore that talking to the plant made it grow faster. His crew did not dispute this, though mostly because Smudge was also the cook and had a tendency to overseason things when provoked. These bizarre little gardening experiments gave rise to whole superstitions. Some pirates believed pineapple plants brought good luck. Others said they kept rats away, though no scientific basis exists for either claim. Still, you'll find references in sea charts, logs, and even graffiti scratched into deck posts. Tend ye the fruit and the winds shall favor. Or, more ominously, rotten leaf, rotten voyage. As you make your way through the lower deck, you pass another pineapple shrine of sorts, 3 tops jammed into a wooden box, alongside a cracked compass and what appears to be someone's old shoe. It's unclear whether this is a planting attempt or an offering, but either way, it speaks to how deeply this fruit has burrowed into shipboard culture. It's no longer just dessert, it's identity. Pirates were notorious for stealing what empires valued. But pineapples were different. They weren't just valuable, they were delicate. They required care, timing, patience, qualities pirates were not especially famous for. So to keep one alive, even just as a plant, became a point of pride. There's even a myth, a whisper passed around coastal taverns, that a pirate ship once successfully grew a full pineapple at sea, that they held a festival for its first sprouting leaf, sang shanties to its roots, and eventually crowned the fruit queen of the ocean. The tale ends with them selling it in England for the price of a small house and retiring to start a pineapple farm. Is it true? Doubtful. But the fact that the story exists at all says everything, because deep down, the pineapple was more than just a prize. It was a dream, a delicious, sticky, spiky dream of stability, of land, of growing something for yourself instead of stealing it from someone else. As you return to the main deck, the sun now sinking low, you notice someone has placed one of the rooted pineapple tops in a small bowl beside the helm. It leans slightly with the motion of the ship, brave little leaves reaching up toward the evening sky, and you can't help but smile, because it's on a vessel that carries no laws, no fixed course, and no fresh laundry. This little fruit plant is doing its best, just like the rest of you. The sea is calm tonight, unnaturally so, the kind of stillness that makes even seasoned pirates lower their voices. The sails hang like tired curtains. The only movement is the occasional ripple caused by a lazy fish or a breeze that forgets to commit. You lie back on a coil of rope, staring at the stars. The deck creaks beneath you in slow, sleep-drunk rhythms. Somewhere near the galley, someone's telling a story. Not just any story, a pineapple story. Because yes, even in the realm of tall pirate tales, the humble pineapple has made its mark. If gold and gunpowder ruled pirate reality, fruit ruled pirate imagination. It wasn't just eaten, it was personified, mythologized, turned into symbols and jokes. And nowhere was this more obvious than in the songs, tattoos, and utterly bizarre folklore that fermented among the crews like, well, pineapple wine. Let's start with the songs. There are shanties, some real, some probably invented 3 drinks in, that reference pineapples as metaphors for home, luck, or love. One old verse goes, "She gave me her heart and a slice from the rind, the sweetest goodbye any sailor could find." Touching, if slightly unsanitary. Another popular tune, "The Pina and the Blade," tells the tale of a pirate who carried a pineapple into battle instead of a pistol, claiming it would protect him through sheer charm. According to the song, he won the fight, got the girl, and opened a fruit stall in Port Royal. Historians remain skeptical. Then there are the tattoos. Historians still argue whether pineapples were a legitimate trend among pirates, or just one of many strange images that ended up inked onto limbs after a bottle too many. But journals and sketches do reference tattoos shaped like pineapples, usually on the arm or back, often next to crossed cutlasses or crude ships. Some were likely badges of inside jokes, others perhaps commemorations of a particularly memorable pineapple party or a rare moment of peace. One account from a Royal Navy deserter describes a pirate with the Fruit of Kings tattooed on his chest and a banner underneath that read, "Sweet to steal, sweeter to keep." He also reportedly had a tattoo of a chicken wearing boots, so credibility is loose. But none of this touches the weirdest layer of pineapple folklore, the ghost stories. Yes, you heard that right. According to whispered tales, there's a ghost ship that sails the Caribbean, carrying nothing but rotting pineapples and the souls of fruit-thieving pirates doomed to forever chase freshness they'll never taste again. It's called La Goleta de la Peña, the sloop of the pineapple. Supposedly, if you spot it on the horizon and smell sweetness on the wind, you're cursed to never again enjoy tropical fruit. Another legend speaks of a captain who married a pineapple, not metaphorically, literally. He became obsessed with one particularly symmetrical fruit, refused to eat it, named it Clarabelle, and held a full wedding ceremony complete with a cake and vows. He was later marooned by his crew for reasons that, frankly, explain themselves. Still, the story persists. It's told in whispers on long, dull nights. Some even claim the ghost of Captain Clarabelle can be seen wandering beaches under the full moon, muttering about her golden eyes and demanding rum for toasts. You chuckle softly in the dark, the rope beneath your back creaking as you shift. Maybe it's all nonsense. Maybe the sea just does something to a sailor's brain. Or maybe pineapples are weirdly powerful. Because at the end of the day, pirates didn't just tell stories for fun. They told them to survive, to create identity, pass time, and process the madness of life adrift. And pineapples, sweet, rare, and stubborn, fit into that tapestry beautifully. They were easy to romanticize. You couldn't grow them just anywhere. You had to chase them, steal them, protect them. And when you finally bit in, the flavor was like something from another world. No wonder they became the stars of songs and fables. Back on deck, the story near the galley is still going. Now it's about a pirate who claimed his pineapple could predict the weather. If she tips left, storm's coming. If she spins, squall's ahead. If she stares at you, get off the ship. The crew laughs. Someone throws a peel. The storyteller bows. You breathe in the salt air, heavy with laughter and distant citrus. The moon is high now, casting a silver sheen across the sea. The ship drifts like a floating lullaby, and for a moment, it feels like time has stopped. Just a crew, a calm sea, and an absolutely absurd amount of fruit-based mythology. And you wouldn't trade it for anything. The calm doesn't last. By midday, the sea has changed its mind. Waves slap harder, the sails strain, and the deck tilts just enough to make you question your lunch. The crew scrambles, half to secure the rigging, half to secure their dignity as barrels roll, and the cat disappears with an expression of supreme disdain. The pineapple crate slides again. This time, it spills. A few tops, one half-rotted rind, and a very confused gecko tumble across the floor before someone grabs the crate and shouts, "Save the orchard!" Only pirates would prioritize potted produce in a gale. The ship heaves. You cling to the railing, soaked and salty, the wind howling in your ears. Somewhere, the captain bellows an order that no one hears. And below deck, in the chaos of buckets and boots, the story of pineapples takes a darker turn. Because for every sweet slice and seaside serenade, there was the reality of where these fruits came from, and who paid the real price for their place on pirate ships. Pineapples, like sugarcane, coffee, and other colonial crops, were part of a brutal network. They grew best on land that had been seized, worked by hands that had no choice in the matter. Enslaved labor built the gardens that pirates so gleefully raided, and while the pirates might have been thorns in the side of empire, they weren't exactly heroes of liberation. Historians still argue about the politics of pirate plunder. Some suggest that pirates disrupted slave economies, attacked slaver ships, and occasionally offered freedom to those they liberated. Others point out that many pirates were perfectly content to trade stolen goods with colonial powers or to work with plantations when it suited them. Pineapples, for all of their sweetness, were wrapped in this contradiction. One journal from a freed sailor aboard a pirate vessel notes that while he loved the sea's freedom, he couldn't help but feel bitterness every time the captain bit into a pineapple. "It tastes of sugar and ash," he wrote, "of labor not ours and pain not paid." Still, there were moments of strange connection. In some islands, enslaved workers used pineapples for more than food. The skins were boiled for medicine, the juice used in spiritual rituals. One Haitian folktale tells of a woman who planted a pineapple as an offering to ancestors, hoping to protect her son from conscription. The fruit bloomed early, and the boy was spared when his ship never arrived. Stories like this made their way into port towns, where pirates drank or gossiped and sometimes listened, and maybe, just maybe, a few began to understand the weight that came with their tropical prizes. Some ships tried to build relationships with local communities, not out of charity, but practicality. Fresh food, shelter, and repair all depended on good relations, and when pirates respected the land and the people, they were more likely to get what they wanted without raising a sword. But it wasn't always peaceful. One bitter account from a Jamaican farmer complains of blackguards and rascals raiding my pineapples, then tossing the rinds into the chapel yard. Another plantation ledger includes an angry tally of lost pineapples, 17, so lost tools, 2, lost dignity, complete. And of course, there were the middlemen, the go-betweens who bought pirate goods, sold stolen fruit in markets, and kept the pineapple trade thriving under a veneer of tropical charm. They existed in every port, knew everyone's secrets, and rarely got their hands dirty. You duck below deck to escape the wind, soaked and thoughtful. In a corner, one of the crew is gently replanting a pineapple top that was knocked loose. He's humming, oblivious. The little plant, ragged and ridiculous, leans in its pot like it's seen things. And maybe it has, because each fruit on the ship carries more than flavor. It carries stories of raids and rituals, of trade and trauma, of jokes and jealousy and journeys that left no one unchanged. Even the rinds have memories. Above you, the storm begins to ease. The waves soften, the sails flap lazily. Someone's passed out on a coil of rope, dreaming of pineapple wine. The cat reappears, damp but composed. Order, such as it ever exists, returns. You sit quietly, the salt drying on your skin, thinking not just of pineapples, but of what they represent. Desire, power, the blurred line between celebration and theft. And somewhere deep in the ship's hold, the last intact fruit lies in its hammock net, unsliced and silent, a golden reminder that even sweetness has shadows. The next morning is the kind you dream about at sea. Gentle waves, a breeze just strong enough to be smug about, and that pale honey-colored light that makes even the mold on the biscuits look charming. The crew stirs slowly, yawning, stretching, and pretending they didn't all panic wildly during last night's squall. The cat has reclaimed her crate. The gecko appears to have decided it lives here now. And the pineapple? Still hanging proudly in its net. There's a hush about it today, a kind of reverence. No one's touching it, no one's even joking about stealing it. You could almost believe it's being protected, not as food anymore, but as something more abstract. A mascot, a relic, a floating gold idol on a ship with too many knives and not enough soap. But beneath this quiet fruit worship, something more complicated is brewing. You see, not everyone aboard agrees on how pineapples should be used, or who should get to decide. Because for all their sugary charm, pineapples could be political, especially in pirate circles, where power wasn't inherited but earned, stolen, or voted on at knife point. Captains weren't kings, they served at the crew's pleasure, and nothing tested that balance quite like the question, who gets the fruit? Historians still argue whether any mutinies were ever sparked specifically over pineapples. The consensus is no, at least not officially, but there are more than a few accounts that suggest fruit was the final straw. One log from a mutinous crew mentions the captain's hoarding of fine edibles while the men gnawed stale biscuit. Another states flatly, he promised slices, we received peels. And it wasn't just about fairness, it was about control. The pineapple was more than delicious, it was symbolic. If the captain got the whole thing, what else might he claim next? The best gun, the biggest share of loot, the only dry hammock? In some crews, pineapples became part of the ship's code. Literal lines added to the articles such as, all exotic fruits to be shared amongst the crew, none to hoard nor barter without vote. And in another case, any man found fermenting the pineapple without cause shall be flogged or forced to drink it. Harsh but understandable. Then came the question of barter. In port towns, especially those under loose colonial governance, pineapples were often accepted as informal currency. Want to secure a night's lodging, a new pair of boots, or an alibi? A pineapple could do it. But when the captain used the ship's one golden fruit to pay off an official or curry favor with a local merchant, not everyone saw it as a wise investment. Some saw it as theft, not from a town or a rival ship, but from them. There's an infamous story out of Nassau where a pirate crew rioted after their captain traded their last pineapple to a governor in exchange for a legal pardon and some port repairs. One sailor wrote afterward, "We were repaired, yes, but not restored. He gave our pride for a pat on the back." That same crew would later rename their ship the Bitter Peel and fly a flag bearing a cartoonishly sad pineapple. Was it satire? Was it vengeance? Probably both. But not all fruit politics ended in mutiny. Some captains learned to use the pineapple for diplomacy, not just externally, but within the crew. They'd slice it ceremoniously, offer the first bite to the ship's cook or the youngest deckhand, use it to soothe tensions, reward bravery, or seal pacts. In a life full of chaos, that sweetness could mean loyalty. There's a letter from a pirate surgeon, one of the rare literate men aboard, who described pineapples as medicine not only for the body, but the bond. He claimed that sharing a fruit had resolved more disputes than swords ever could. Of course, not everyone was so poetic. One pirate journal, barely legible and soaked in something that may have once been grog, reads, "Pineapple was eaten by all. Then Jerry tried to sing again. We regret both events." Still, the broader truth holds, pineapples were power. And where there's power, there's politics. So when your ship pulls into a sleepy port this afternoon, and the captain marches off with the pineapple in hand, eyebrows raise. Conversations start, low and sharp. Is he bartering? Gifting? Bragging? And what are you getting in return? You lean on the rail, watching him disappear down a stone alley, the fruit tucked under his arm like a scepter. You hear someone mutter behind you, "Hope it's worth it." And just like that, the calm is gone again. Not a storm, not yet, but a shift. Because in the world of pirates, even something as simple as a fruit can ripple into something far more dangerous. And it's never really about the pineapple. It's about who gets to hold it. The pineapple does not return with the captain. He comes back alone, his coat freshly dusted, his expression unreadable. No fruit, no explanation. The crew doesn't ask, not out loud, but you can feel the questions simmering below deck, spreading like spilled rum across the planks. What was it traded for? Why was it done in secret? And more importantly, was it his to give? You've spent enough time among pirates to know that nothing is more suspicious than silence. And now, with no pineapple to rally around, the ship feels emptier somehow, quieter, off balance. Even the cat is glaring. Now would be a good time to tell you about the pineapple curse. Not a real curse, obviously, but a whisper, a superstition, a shrug of folklore born from too many months at sea, too many sleepless nights, and the unfortunate human tendency to assign cosmic meaning to fruit-related disappointment. The curse goes like this. He who gives the pineapple without sharing invites the sea to take it back. No one really knows where it started. Some say it came from the islands, passed through the mouths of merchant sailors who saw one too many captains disappear after a selfish snack. Others claim it was invented by a bored quartermaster who once got denied a slice. Regardless of origin, the belief stuck that to hoard the fruit or to trade it without the crew's blessing was to anger the sea itself, to risk storms, sickness, even shipwreck. Historians still argue whether this curse was a real superstition or simply a tool for controlling greedy leadership. Pirate democracy was a strange thing, equal parts brutal and progressive. Captains could be voted out, crew members could challenge decisions, but a curse, that added flavor, made justice feel inevitable. There's a famous case in the early 1700s, Captain Roaring Nate, who was said to have eaten 2 whole pineapples in his quarters while his crew gnawed on raw onions. The next day, a squall hit. His ship was wrecked off the coast of Dominica, and the only survivor was the cook, who had reportedly declined the fruit out of principle. Coincidence? Probably. But try telling that to a crew of salty men with bad tempers and worse hygiene, especially when you're standing on a deck where the fruit used to hang, and now hangs only doubt. By late afternoon, grumbling has turned to whispers. A few men cluster near the helm. A dice game is abandoned mid-round. Someone very pointedly sings a verse of the piña and the blade, but changes the lyrics to, "He sold our sweet treasure for dry, dusty boots." The boots in question are, notably, the captain's. Tension builds slowly aboard a ship, like steam in a sealed pot. You don't always hear the boil until it's about to whistle. The captain, for his part, says nothing. Maybe he knows it wasn't the right move. Maybe he thinks he bought the crew something better than sugar. Maybe he's planning another raid, another glorious feast, another golden fruit. Or maybe, just maybe, he didn't think it mattered. But it does, because the pineapple wasn't just fruit, it was theirs. A trophy of survival, a reminder of joy, a symbol of all the small, ridiculous victories that kept them going when everything else, the weather, the empire, the mildew, seemed stacked against them. And now it's gone, traded away, without a word. It's not mutiny yet, but it's not far off either. You wander the ship as night falls, the shadows stretching long across the boards. The wind is rising again, but not enough to distract from the mood. Eyes follow the captain. Conversations stop when he walks past. And somewhere, deep below, someone's carved a pineapple into the wood with a long crack running through the middle. The cat, sensing drama, has relocated to the highest part of the mast. Even the tiny potted plant, the one they call the orchard, seems to wilt a little, its leaves slouching under the weight of tension. It's amazing, really, how much power a single fruit can hold, not just in calories or gold, but in morale, in meaning. Because in a world of shifting tides and slippery loyalties, the pineapple had become an anchor, a silly, spiky, sweet-smelling anchor of shared pride. And now, unmoored, the ship drifts, not physically, but emotionally. The celebration has soured, the sweetness gone, and all that's left is the peel of trust, curling in the sun. You wake in the darkest hour of morning, just before dawn, when the world is suspended in that strange hush between yesterday and not quite yet. The ship is still. The air is thick with salt and tension. Even the sea seems to be holding its breath. No shouting, no wind, just creaking timbers and the faint rustle of someone pacing above. You slip on your boots and follow the sound. Up on deck, you see him. The captain, alone, leaning on the rail, looking out toward the fading stars, as if trying to read the sea for forgiveness. The boots he traded the pineapple for, yes, those new, suspiciously shiny ones, are kicked off beside him, wet from dew. His coat hangs loose, and on the railing next to his hand sits a pineapple, or rather half of one, shrunken, bruised, probably overripe, but unmistakably a peace offering. No words are spoken, not yet. Below deck, the crew sleeps on, some restlessly, some curled like question marks, some undoubtedly still grumbling in their dreams. But you know when they wake, they'll see it, and they'll talk, and they'll decide. Because this is the final act of the pineapple's strange, sticky journey. It began as a prize, then became a ritual, then a wedge, a point of pride, of betrayal, of comedy and curse. And now, it sits quietly on a wooden rail, waiting to see whether it will be forgiven or forgotten. Historians still debate the decline of pineapple fever in pirate life. Some say it faded with changing trade winds as fruit became more accessible. Others claim pirates simply moved on to newer obsessions, coffee, chocolate, or even tobacco. But in truth, the pineapple never quite disappeared. It stayed in the sea songs, in the old carvings, in the memory of men who once danced barefoot on deck with fruit juice running down their beards. It became legend, and legends, unlike pineapples, do not rot easily. By the time the sun finally crests the horizon, burning gold through the mist, the half pineapple has been moved, not discarded, not hidden, just relocated. It now rests in the galley, surrounded by small things, a rum bottle, a silver coin, a chipped cup, and someone's best spoon. A new shrine, perhaps, a new beginning. You take a deep breath. The air is warm already. The ship creaks, alive again. And somewhere, out at the edge of hearing, someone strikes up a tune, soft, slow, the old one. She gave me her heart and a slice from the rind. It won't fix everything, but it's a start. Because pirate life was never perfect. But when things were good, when the wind was kind, the crew united, and the fruit sweet enough to make your eyes close, you remembered why you stayed. Not for gold, not for glory, but for moments like this. So now, as the sails settle and the stars fade into the light of another day, you let your breath fall into rhythm with the sea, slow, gentle, like a tide that's forgotten how to crash. The pineapple, silly, spiky little thing, has carried us far tonight. Through sweetness and superstition, through hunger and harmony, through tall tales and quiet truths. It was never just a fruit. It was a symbol of survival in a world that offered very little softness, a little golden rebellion against the salt and the storm. You picture it now, sitting quietly among the crew's trinkets, not as a source of conflict, but a memory, a shared joke, a sticky reminder of something almost sacred. As you close your eyes, the ship rocks gently beneath you. The wood creaks. The breeze carries the faintest scent of citrus and sea. And for just a moment, you are weightless, floating somewhere between dream and history, between lullaby and logbook. No need to move, no need to speak. Just let the tide take you. Let the sea hold you, like a story being gently closed for the night. And if you dream of pineapples, well, that's just part of the voyage.